The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chuy.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. The City of Nanaimo is taking a step on the road to replacing its aging public works yard. Nanaimo City Council voted 6-3 in favor of a plan to fund more detailed designs for the project. Nanaimo is looking to upgrade facilities on Labieux Road by building a new administration building and by building a new fleet maintenance facility to service vehicles like garbage trucks and snow ploughs. A plan to borrow up to $90 million to complete the upgrades had to be shelved after an unsuccessful alternative approval process last year. The designs are projected to cost $1.8 million. Staff say it's planning that will need to be completed no matter how the rest of the project is financed. I spoke about the latest developments with Bill Sims, General Manager of Engineering and Public Works with the City of Nanaimo. How did the city arrive at this course of action on the Public Works Yard project?
Well, absolutely. It's a good question. So as everyone's fairly well aware, we need to reconstruct or rebuild our public works facility. Originally, it was envisioned to be built over several phases, with the first phase being the fleet and maintenance center, and then subsequent phases being other buildings and facilities. About last year, we sort of sensed the mood of the public wasn't interested in the expense of a fleet maintenance facility on its own, and with the impending question of what else was going on with the project. And so we sort of looked at the project and reconsidered how we could approach it. And the two highest priorities, the fleet maintenance facility, also known as a shop, and then the crew and admin building, were the two highest priorities. If we do it all in a single project, both the fleet maintenance and the crew and admin building, we could save quite a bit of time, quite a bit of money. It's a little more complicated to build because you've got to keep things operational, but at the same time, it was a much better move. We felt. And then, as required by provincial legislation, every time a municipality wants to borrow for the long term, the legislative term is attain the approval of the electorate. And so the question goes out is, are you willing to support borrowing for this particular project? And that was turned down by the voters. Most, they need a 10% threshold, which they met. And so that was an opportunity for council to pause and reconsider how we would approach this project. Is there another way of doing it? Or is there another way of funding it, or whatever? And so we considered all of the various things that we could possibly do to move the project forward. And the operation or the options run from let's go out for yet another alternative approval process or a referendum, to let's fund the whole thing by raising taxes because we need to pay for these as the project unfolds. But there was no new information that we could tell the public that hadn't already been shared over the last 3 years. So this was an opportunity, and this is what we're finally getting to my point, I guess, is leading to the recommendation of let's advance the project along the design phase or the design stage to get more detail on the project and to nail things down a little bit better. And then we'll be able to be more confident in the cost. We'll be able to share more details and plans with the public. And then perhaps a year from now, we are coming back to the public to say we'd like to borrow X million dollars for this project with better certainty than we have at this point.
Could you give me more information about what new info will come from the designs, what you'll be able to go and communicate to the public that you hadn't before?
Right. So this It kind of gets into, and I really hope to avoid falling into my own trap of technical jargon, and because it means something to me, but it may not mean something to your listeners. But that is, we're at a stage now, what we call conceptual design, and so it's very basic. It says, okay, well, the building is going to be, this long by this wide, and this many floors high, and it's going to have this many rooms in it, and this is where we'll put the washroom, and this is where we'll put, and these offices need to be this size, and this service bay needs to be this long. It's pretty basic. If we can advance that, in other words, we fill out some of the details in that basic design to say, the walls need to be this thick and have this much reinforcing steel, or this type of cladding, and we think there's going to be 36 toilets in this building. I'm just making numbers up. If with this many toilets and this many sinks and this many desks, and sort of start to quantify things to a greater level of detail, that helps bring certainty to the cost. So if you were to say, build me a house, well, how big do you want it? And it's this long by this wide. Well, that's about $400 a square foot for that house. And then you kind of go, well, that seems like a lot of money, or what am I getting for that? Well, it depends on what you add to it or put into the house. Do you want marble countertops, or are you happy with laminate? And working out all those details as you develop the project design helps you refine the cost.
Can you help break down the $1.8 million cost to do the design process? I know that staff are looking at what's called an integrated project delivery process. Can you help sort of explain what that is and how it works?
Yeah, it's a means of delivering a project or project procurement, like, buying a project, if I can use it that way. The traditional, air quotes again, traditional method of building projects is called design, bid, build. And so that's pretty common in public and private industry. You have an architect or an engineer spend a year or so developing a design, and then you put together this beautiful package, and then you put it out. We call it putting it out on the street, or put it out to market and say, anybody's welcome to bid on this. There's some certain restrictions. Contractors come along, they pick up the bid package, and after a short period of time, they've worked out the pricing. They submit the pricing. The client, the city, looks at the various bids and goes, here's the one that has the best value, or here's the lowest price, or here's the one we want to work with. And so and then you build it. And so you agree to the price. You've done all your design work up front. The contractor says, I'm pricing this based on, that design. And as you evolve it through the project, it tends to, you uncover details that, you couldn't think of fully in the design, or the contractor didn't allow the costs for, and then there's always this discussion about, I need more money for this or more money for that. So that's the traditional model, design, bid, build. And there's variations of that. The process that we're talking about, which is starting to be used more and more by public agencies all across North America, is gets away from the three-legged stool of the owner on one corner, the architect in another corner, and the contractor in another corner, and puts everybody in the same room, the same team, working towards the same goal. So the owner says, we want a public works building which consists of this for this many staff and for this many trucks that we fix and so on. And so the architect starts to develop concepts, and as the architect's developing concepts, the contractor is starting to price them. And so and then there's this sort of constant feedback loop. The contractor is feeding back to the architect and saying, if you did this, then it would be better to, easier to build, and we could reduce costs. And the owner can chime in and say, yeah, we think that'll work for us, or no, we can't do it that way because. It's a sort of working together to develop the design of the project. And since everybody's in the same room and on the same team, everyone's invested in it, and you create create a condition where we say, here's the project cost, and this is the project cost, and we've allowed, everything's open book, so we've allowed for the contractor to have his costs covered and to make the standard amount of profit. We've allowed the architect to have their costs covered and to make a standard amount of profit, and we, the owner, get the benefit of the project. So then you set that project budget. We call it a validation. We validate the project budget, and that's what you proceed forward with. As the project evolves and as you start working and doing more detailed design and start to build things, if you find opportunities for cost savings, that cost savings gets split. We call it as a bonus to the parties within the contract. And so the 1.8 million, I'm sorry, my answers are long to your initial questions, but the 1.8 million buys us the preparation time with the architect, with the contractor, with somebody to sort of facilitate this whole process, to pay those companies their time and time investment to get to a validated cost estimate. And so at the end of that process, we'll have a contractor on board, we'll have an architect on board, and we'll have a number that we're quite confident in.
What is the timeline like on the planning process? When might we know who, say, the contractor and the architect are?
I would say over the next few months, that'll be the first steps that we take in the process. So we need to, within our own processes, develop, internal to the city, develop procurement for both of those parties. We have an architect online already. It's Casian, and if they can, operate in an IPD environment, then they'll likely be our chosen architect. And now we go out and find a contractor. So it's like we put it out there, and ideally we want contractors that have experience delivering projects in IPD or integrated project delivery method. And that's what we'll spend the next few months on.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada and generous listeners like you. With your support, we can expand Midcoast Morning from 2 to 3 original programs per week to cover local news, current affairs, and arts and culture.
The City of Nanaimo is funding more detailed designs on its planned public works yard upgrades. At a meeting Monday, Nanaimo City Council voted 6-3 in favor of allocating $1.8 million from various reserves towards the planning process. The city was forced to consider its options for the project on Labieux Road after failing to receive permission to borrow up to $90 million in an alternative approval process last year. At that stage, it was anticipated that the costs of detailed design would be included in the borrowing. The design process is expected to take till around the end of the year. I spoke about the latest updates with Bill Sims, General Manager of Engineering and Public Works with the City of Nanaimo. There will be a couple of weather events, I guess you could call them, that will be fresh in people's minds. One, maybe on more the hypothetical front, we just had an earthquake that people could feel last week in the coastal region. We also saw a lot of snowfall in the month of February. Did the current city facilities, how did they hold up to that snowfall? Were things like snow removal impacted by the state of our facilities?
Good question, and it's hard to draw a straight line between A and B because everything is so variable in terms of the events. Like, remember, I believe it was February 2nd overnight on into the 3rd. We started with rain hovering around, falling on ground that had been frozen for a long time. So we had this rain falling, which was fine. And then the temperature dropped and the rain froze, and then it turned to snow. So that's what created a bit of pandemonium on the Monday morning, February the 3rd, and was a scramble for our crews, even though they were out the day before salting and preparing. It was a scramble for our crews to get the roads to the point where they were drivable. That happened after a few hours, and it's do the same thing with every event. We focus on the priority routes. We adapt to conditions. We get them out there as soon as snow reaches a few inches in depth, and and we just carry on. Now, was the state of the facilities an impact on that? I can't, definitively say that there's a direct relationship to us responding, as I said, because of the event is so unique, or it varies every time. Now, as the event wears on, our equipment becomes, quite broken down and fatigued, and so now we're trying to deal with 6 or 7 days at our current shop and fix the equipment, get it back out on the road fairly quickly, and we need to run mechanics around the clock to be able to keep up with keeping the snow ploughs and the salters on the road. So you can see as the community grows, we're now, believe it or not, 110,000 people. It just seems like yesterday we were talking about, we've just passed 100, but now we're at 110. As the community grows, the fleet of snowplows, the fleet of all of our service vehicles needs to grow to keep up with servicing, providing the services to the community. If we stay with the same rundown shop, we can't get those vehicles turned around as quickly. Similarly with the earthquake, it was a great wake-up call for everyone, and everyone should be signing up for their buoyance alert. Everybody should be, paying attention to their grab and go bag and their emergency kit. Everybody should have that, period. But these are good reminders. So we already have a protocol in place, throughout the organization, that when we're even a minor earthquake like that, if you feel it, don't assume that it's too small to cause damage. Just go out and do the checks. So we checked all of our critical infrastructure. We monitored our water and sewer system to make sure that everything was functioning before, during, and after. And similarly with our facilities, we had a number of facility staff out looking carefully at all of our facilities. Even though it was a very minor event, it was a good, we'll call it a practice run, or a good, exercise to go out and do that.
At Monday's council meeting, there were a minority of councillors who were suggesting exploring major alterations to the Public Works Yard project, things like looking at different locations or, for example, incorporating housing into the admin building. How much would even looking at options like that impact the timeline or the scope of the project and the work already underway?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that the practicality, like the Public Works Yard, through some foresight, the property that is now the Bevan, what is we knew originally as the Bevan Estate, was purchased in 1955 from the sale of the old fairgrounds, which is now Port Place Mall. So the city owned that at one point, sold that, and went and bought this Bevan Estate, which is now Bevan Park, and all of the properties that are the fire station and the Public Works Yard and so on. That was a generational decision that had a lasting benefit for many generations since 1955. It's located in the geographic and demographic center of Nanaimo, so it provides, from an operational point of view, provides the best and most efficient service to the entire community. Now, you could also argue that, well, maybe if we did this with satellite yards, we might be, divided it up. But I think, again, I'll use the word efficient and cost effective. And just at a simple level, the quick question is, well, if not there on land that we've owned since the 1950s, then where? The community owns this land. Then where would we put it? There's not. The current site is 15 acres, which is constrained for the operation that we have. 15 acres is we're making it work, but it's not huge. Where would you find 15, 18 acres of property that offers a similar level of facility, let alone the cost of purchasing that property, let alone the cost of servicing that property with water and sewer and phone and hydro and roads? If we consider selling 15 acres of property for housing, the industrial housing land zone for housing, for example, might be, let's say, $500,000 an acre. To go and purchase industrial land in another location, we'd be looking at $1 million to $1.5 million or more per acre. So right there, you're sort of losing money to sell the land for another use. Let alone the fact that we have, in addition to the fleet maintenance and the admin building already existing on the site, we have a number of other buildings. We have a truck barn and storage sheds and paint shop and a number of them, purchasing and stores and inventory, all sort of situated. If we were to move the operation somewhere else, now we have to reconstruct or redo those particular facilities as well. So essentially, I think you'd be starting off in a negative. It would cost significantly more to do it from a capital point of view, and then we would degrade the efficiency of the operation and the service to the community for generations to come. Because quite frankly, we're in the ideal spot to serve the community.
The conceptual design work on this project was done in 2021. From the sounds of it, it's going to be towards the end of this year or even the beginning of next one when this next stage of detailed design has gone on. Beyond this one project, which is about building a facility to service vehicles and an admin building, what are the lessons or the things you've taken away from just this whole process and the challenges it has faced and the time it has taken to get to this point where it's still a ways down the road?
That's a pretty profound question. It's very interesting. And I think it ties to a level of, let's say, distrust in government, fueled by misinformation, social media, the political situation, that's all across North America. So there's this lack of trust. Maybe a generation ago, people would understand what the common good was, and yes, we recognize that we need a public works building, or we recognize that we need a community center because that serves the public good. And if we're all contributing money to it, we're all getting a benefit as a society. I think people have drifted away from that societal outlook and drifted more towards what's in it for me. We spent a couple of generations being, very selfish and focused inwards and less concern and care for our neighbor. Coupled, as I say, the distrust of government, sort of sparked by some very unfortunate examples in North America, is one end of the spectrum, and the political opportunism that we see at the one end, and then this drift, this lack of care for the well-being of society in general. I mean, that's obviously, I'm not citing specific examples, but just in general, there's this more of an inward and self-focused view. I think, to me, those are a couple of the big things that have soured people on the need to develop these very important projects. Without the support of a public works building as a fundamental, we can't plow the roads, we can't fix the potholes, we can't keep the water running, we can't keep the sewers running, we can't pick up the garbage, all of which we can do at a very affordable cost, with the facilities that support it.
Do you think not having this process of detailed design played a role in maybe some of the distrust you were talking about?
I think there's certainly an understanding or a lack of understanding. This idea that was posited that this project should be subject to a referendum, and it's not necessarily the democratic process to have every project that a community builds for its citizens subject to a yay or nay. The democratic process is you elect councillors on your behalf to make those decisions. And this is not benefiting staff. This is not benefiting politicians. All of the work that we do is for the benefit of the community. So having the detailed designs, I think, quite honestly, with the political mood, let me say, the sort of the anger that we witnessed, and the distrust that we witnessed, I don't think there would have been another reason for rejection. So no, I don't think that was a deciding factor.
Well, Bill Sims, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Joe, can I just add one point that's interesting in my own mind, how people view their taxes, because we do hear that a lot. They can't afford the taxes, another tax increase, et cetera, to pay for these sorts of things. When we're talking about taxes that we pay, and I'm not just diminishing the people's affordability, and the property taxes may be high, but I will note that all of the taxes that every individual pays, 90% of all of our taxes go to senior levels of government, provincial government, the federal government. 10% of the taxes we pay as individuals goes to local government. So it's when local government looks after 60% of the nation's infrastructure, having 10% of the tax dollars, it's really hard. It puts us in a constrained space. And it's most unfortunate that people are most vocal and attacking of the local government that provides the day in, day out services to them on 10% of the tax dollars that are paid out. And so that's what's kind of maybe, it's an interesting observation, and I wish people could understand what they're complaining about is a relatively small amount of money that's going out of their pockets.
Bill Sims is General Manager of Engineering and Public Works with the City of Nanaimo. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Frew, our technical advisor. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band, Waste Management. Get in touch at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.